What's up, everybody? My name is Patrick Oduchi, and this is Engineering Cannabis. I'm your cannabis engineer, your informational weed man. And today, I'm going to basically be doing a recap of the year, since we're entering a new year in a couple of weeks. So why not just do a recap on what's happened in this year, the 2019 we're about to leave, and what's been happening in the cannabis industry, the good, the bad, and see how it's progressed over basically this year itself. So let's start. First things first, we have to first start by first giving a hand to two states, Michigan and Illinois. Michigan and Illinois recently implemented full recreational cannabis usage in the state, with laws basically be a huge amount of, with laws, big amount of laws in terms of recreational, but it's now being fully implemented in Illinois and Michigan. And now the good thing about the implementation, especially in Michigan they had a total sales within 3 weeks of $3.1 million of total recreational sales of cannabis in just 3 weeks of $3.1 million. Now that's something. And when you see online, when you see recreational stores, you see a line of individuals, as the eye can see, and basically in 3 weeks, Michigan basically netted $3.1 million in state sales of recreational marijuana or recreational cannabis. Illinois also had a record implementation. In some news, they even talked of they even ran out of basically cannabis in that state, and they had also a record amount of sales. I'm not sure, but I'm also thinking in terms of the millions too, in sales. So the implementation of both Illinois and Michigan was a success in terms of record sales. So now, with that stated, we also need to know which states are now basically legal, which states have only medical, and which states just are basically pure, just illegal in both medical and recreation. And I have a list here, and I'll go through the list, and I'll talk about how those states are legal and legal, and what in my next video I might talk about what we might be seeing next year in terms of implementation and laws. So let's go by the states. So for states with just medical right now, just medical, as of the end of 2019. Just medical, no recreational: Arizona, Arkansas, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Hawaii, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Minnesota, Missouri, Montana, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Texas, Utah, Virginia, and West Virginia. And these states just have medical cannabis in their states. And these are just 27 states. And New York and New Jersey were trying to implement recreational this year, but it didn't go through. Some of it was shut down. But I think New Jersey next year is going to be put in a ballot for public vote on basically implementation of cannabis recreationally, and probably New York. But currently, right now, just 27 states have just medical. Now, with full legal, now these states, there are 12 states that just have fully legal recreational, both recreational and medical. And there are 12 states. And these states are Alaska, California, Colorado, District of Columbia, Illinois, Maine, Massachusetts, Michigan, Nevada, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington. These 12 states have fully legalized for recreational and medical cannabis usage in their states. These 12 states are just basically, and more states should be coming up next year based on balance. But we'll talk about that in a couple of videos next. Then these states that just have illegal, it's illegal. It's no medical or recreational. And these states are Alabama, Idaho, Kansas, Mississippi, Nebraska, North Carolina, South Carolina, North Dakota, Tennessee, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. These states there isn't any medical or recreational usage in these states. And as you can see, we have now 12 states that have recreational and medical full usage, and we have 12 states that have basically it's illegal to use in any kind of form, medical or recreational. And we have 27 states that have adopted just medical use in the cannabis space. So we are seeing basically increase in basically states that are adopting recreational and medical itself. And within this year, we also had some other aspects, good or bad. We had the FDA come out with their rules on CBD and their implementation of CBD, and they basically on their regulation of CBD, not regulation, but their thoughts on CBD. And basically it states that they don't have enough research for basically to conclude the health benefits of CBD. And as I've said previously, people are just selling CBD in droves, but they don't have that knowledge on that. There isn't any backing or saying CBD cures this ailment. CBD is still being basically studied. It's still in a clinical trial. So the FDA recently came out with that rule that, hey, we can't back any CBD and any health benefits. It's basically people are saying until we see more research on it. And also the USDA also came out with their rules on hemp, which it's been hindering a lot of hemp farmers because some of it is very complicated, especially in dealing with the amount of THC in your plant. It's stated that THC has to be below 0.3%. Now we're talking of, is it Delta 9 THC, or are we talking about the total amount of THC in that system, in that plant? By the USDA law, it's talking about dry weed, total amount of THC in that plant, and that's causing a lot of strife with the hemp farmers. So the USDA came out with a rule in terms of basically how hemp and CBD is basically looked at and the chemical composition of that. So with the USDA coming out, we also had some of the problems with we had a problem with the vape community, the vape contamination. And that problem basically found out how it was contaminated. And basically now the vaping industry is now facing a little bit more scrutiny in terms of basically adding cannabis and a lot of additives in terms of the cannabis with the vaping. So these are basically being looked at. With the vape also came with that we also had two legislations that currently passed the House of Rep, basically Congress. And these are the MORE Act, which is going to be looked into the Congress and basically passed the first stage in the Congress. So it's going to be voted on. And the MORE Act basically removes cannabis from a Schedule 1 to a more lesser Schedule 2, probably to an alcoholic beverage standard. So that's what the MORE Act does. And the MORE Act also decriminalizes cannabis itself, and also gives a lot of provisions in terms of the cannabis industry itself. So that's the MORE Act is a huge stepping stone in legalizing cannabis in the federal level itself, and it's going to be heading into the Senate, but with a high Republican majority in the Senate, most likely we might not see it pass, but fingers crossed we might see it pass, and it might be federal legalization of cannabis might occur maybe as soon as next year or the upper year. Fingers crossed. And the next one is the State Banking Act. The Safe Banking Act. The Safe Banking Act basically it now provides banking institutions to the cannabis industry the ability to basically make transactions with banking institutions. It doesn't basically make cannabis industry a fraudulent industry. It basically gives it more backing. It gives it authority to basically utilize banks and utilize transactions with banks. So with the Safe Banking Act, it deals with the monetary side of the cannabis industry, where currently banks are not most banks are not basically dealing with the cannabis industry because of numerous regulations, and cannabis is still classified as Scheduled 1. So the sale and distribution is still considered legal on the federal level. So with that said, banking institutions are reluctant to basically offer services. So with the Safe Banking Act, those fears or those services can be easily provided to the cannabis space. And with that, we had the Safe Banking Act, we have the USDA, we had the FDA rules on hemp, we had the USDA's rule on hemp too. We had the MORE Act, we had the Safe Banking Act, we had Michigan hitting a home run in terms of sales of cannabis in 3 weeks, 3.1 million. We have Illinois and high profit margins, especially with the implementation. And we have now 12 states that have legal cannabis use, both recreational and medical. So in exception with the vaping contamination, in totality, the cannabis industry is moving into the right direction and paying more attention to the customer base, and basically following up also on trying to basically be a proponent to full legalization in the federal level. So again, the cannabis industry is a wide industry, and it's a growing industry. I'm looking forward into looking at more research being done and focusing on research on human health too, and also looking in the following year looking at not only more research but more states go into legalization and hopefully provide full federal legalization over time within the cannabis space. So again, my name is Patrick Onochi. I'm a cannabis engineer, your informational weed man, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.